Hang on. So I got.
So earlier, wait. Before I go on, earlier you said there were only minor differences.
Yeah.
Are you a scholar of the New Testament?
I do my best.
Are you a scholar? Yes or no?
How do you define
Are you a scholar? Yes or no?
read it.
Are you? I read it too. Doesn't make me a scholar.
I got the Greek. I'll go back.
Doesn't matter if you. Do you know Greek?
No. I go
Exactly.
back.
So you're not a scholar. Just say it, Julie. It won't put you down.
I'm not
Look,
bothered. I don't know what you're defining as a scholar, so
I'm defining
saying,
Bart Ehrman, Dr. Bart Ehrman, who has got a PhD.
There's loads of people with PhDs.
Do you have one?
Yeah, but you're not.
No, but
Exactly.
I've
So
read people who
wait a
have got
minute,
PhDs.
Julie. I'm comparing you, not lots of other people.
Yeah.
Not the fake PhDs like Jay Smith. What I'm saying is Bart Ehrman with a true PhD
But-
from a true university.
Yeah.
Now, Bart Ehrman said that there are many thousands of manuscripts with many thousands of differences between the manuscripts. In fact, all of them have differences. Now, let me ask you this, Julie.
So
You said the earliest manuscripts available to you of the entire New Testament is the 4th century. How will you fill the gap from Jesus, 350 years after Jesus? Tell me, how would you know there were no changes made from the copies of the copies of the copies that were made?
Because we
thousands
have,
of them.
Because we have all the copies.
Yeah, but do you have the originals?
We have the copies of the copies. So,
And they're all different.
so there's,
Do you have the originals?
Let me finish. There's slight differences, so therefore they authenticate the original.
No, but how do you know there's slight differences if you don't have the originals?
They are not slight differences.
Well, no, but
He said there are all differences. They're all different.
So 300 years on, if people made copies of copies of copies when they were written, and now we have those this many years on, and they don't contradict each other.
How do you know they don't contradict? You don't have the originals. No, but look, if you have a copy, listen to this.
So listen, if
No, Julie, I don't think you understand.
No,
Listen
you
to this.
don't.
Imagine
You
in the
don't.
1st century, imagine this, in the 1st century, if a copy of the gospel is made, yes? Then you lose it.
No,
Listen, I'm giving my perspective. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay,
I don't want to know your perspective, listen to mine now. First,
You haven't had my perspective.
well, I will wait for your perspective after if you let me finish.
Okay, go on.
So imagine in the 1st century, a copy of the manuscript was, a manuscript of the gospel was made.
Yeah, it was
somebody wrote it down, yes?
Yeah.
We don't know who wrote it down. Then this copy got lost. Then you find another manuscripts 300 years after that. Now, if the original copy was lost, how would you know that copy which is in the 4th century corresponds exactly, or even minor differences or major differences, if you have lost completely the first original manuscripts?
Well, one that's not.
Wait, Mark, let Julie speak, because I said I'll give her a chance.
Interesting point.
Good.
Interesting point.
Because that is what Bart Ehrman is saying exactly. Even if you had copies of the copies of the copies of the copies, the important thing is really.
I'll go back and research.
Okay,
I'll
go
go
on.
back and research it.
I'll give Mark the chance.
Thank you.
Go
So,
research it. Yeah, go.
first of all, during the 1st to the 3rd century, this is when we had papyrus, and as we know, that is a very non-storageable form of written
It's perishable.
text.
It's perishable. Yeah.
Okay, very perishable. Yes.
But we have all the
let me-
manuscripts
let
from
me,
that.
Let me explain to what happened.
So that doesn't really
so during that 1 to the 1st to the 3rd century, not a lot was preserved. But what we have got preserved are fragments, and there's quite a lot of fragments. But I do appreciate they're only fragments. We
What's the
don't have-
earliest?
Actually, it's a fragment of John, isn't it?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, what's the earliest?
Quite a few.
1870, I think.
No, it's not 8070. It's nothing from the 1st century. Trust
Yes,
me.
yes, there is. We have got fragments. of
Really,
first
what is
century.
it called?
I don't
1st
know-
century.
I don't know the name of it, but yeah.
Mark, trust me. If you had the 1st century
in the
manuscript of the
museum,
Bible,
isn't it?
you'll be the richest
No,
man.
no, no.
It's
It's
in the museum.
fragments.
Even fragment, even if you had a fragment.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
small
The
fragments.
one that you guys are talking about, I know it's called the P52.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
is in the
And before we took
John
that.
Rylands library. You know when it was dated? Late 2nd century, early 3rd century.
Yeah, but we're
Please,
talking
go,
about
guys, go and
fragments.
do your homework.
Right, so yeah.
So what is the earliest manuscripts you said? Sorry, what's the earliest fragment you think you have?
They estimated about 79 to 10.
I'm talking about the fragment, not when it was written apparently.
Yeah, fragment, yeah.
You have a fragment from the 1st century. Where is it?
Let him speak.
No one has heard of it.
Speak. Oh, sorry.
Stop. I know you're getting angry, Julie.
That's okay. We can discover. I can provide
They're getting triggered now.
No, that's fine.
Where did you get that
One
information
second.
from?
I'm happy to provide that information. I don't have access to hand.
Where did you get that information from? Dan Wallace?
Yes.
No, no, I don't know.
Who else?
Look,
But I provide
Mark,
that. No,
let's be fair. You haven't done the homework.
Let me,
It's a
no,
secret.
no, no,
79.
no. Let me
You guys are terrible.
Yeah, yeah, go
This
ahead.
is all lies.
Without the
Say
continued
what you're
cutting.
going. Say what you're going to say.
let-
Say what you're going to say.
Can I start to finish without interruption?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
from where, please?
Yeah, but you have to give
I
us
don't
all.
know
Let him
offhand, but I'll
finish,
provide
for
that information.
Okay,
for
bring
you.
it then.
Yeah, we'll bring it.
But there's no
I'm happy
point
to.
telling something which you don't know about.
No, it doesn't mean I don't know. I just haven't got the information to hand.
Yeah.
But I've memorised at
Go
least
on,
what
say it.
what I did find out is there are fragments, albeit not much, of the 1st century. But what I'm
Is
also
it
trying
publishable?
to...
Is it published?
Can I-
Finish a sentence.
I will provide
Now
the
you realise how it
information.
feels not
Yeah.
finishing something. Yeah?
So it's not going to help
Fair
yourself.
enough.
with
Take
the
your own
code
medical. Let
understanding.
Mark finish. Go on.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's the first thing. The second thing is.
Sorry, what was it I didn't hear? Can you repeat that again?
So we have got fragments around the 1st century.
Are you sure about that?
Yes, I
You're
can provide that
100%.
next time. I'm providing that next time.
Trust me.
Right.
Next time I see you, and if you don't provide, can I call you
Absolutely.
someone who's not credible, like Julie calls us liars? I wouldn't use the term liar because you're saying it out of ignorance, maybe. I won't be that blunt.
Let me finish my
Is that what you had
point.
to say
So
as
during the 1st and 3rd century, of course, because the papyrus not been quite perishable, there hasn't been a lot preserved. However, let me just explain.
Okay, sorry.
So that is one of the only issues we've got. Obviously, the Quran came along. You had the parchments and much more, sustainable texts, and we have the same thing from the 4th century when that parchment was available. The animal skins was available. Then we had loads of copies, thousands of copies from the 4th century. Yeah, from the 4th centuries onwards.
Slowly. From the 4th century
Onwards.
Yeah. How many manuscripts are there in the 2nd century, 3rd century, 4th century, 5th century onwards until time of Islam? Because you said, what is it, thousands? How many manuscripts in total do you have in the Greek?
It's something like 5,000.
It's about less than 6,000. So you can't say thousands of it. So in the 4th century, how many did you have?
I don't know the exact numbers.
You're making claims though, thousands.
Oh yeah, in total over those centuries.
Only a few
From the 4th.
countable in hand.
No. From the 4th to the 6th, 7th, or whatever, there were a substantial number of copies.
Okay,
manuscripts, yeah?
Mark, can I make a quick point?
Yeah.
Bringing Dr. Bart Ehrman again here.
Yeah.
I have a video of this. In that video, he says 94% of the 5,500 manuscripts of the New Testament come from the 9th century or later.
Right.
I'll give you the video.
Yeah, I don't know the
9th century or later.
The numbers, but I'm saying
9th century, nearly a millennium after Jesus.
Right. Here's my point.
So there you go.
Right, let's go back to Bart
How
Ehrman.
can you
No.
say that is the
I don't know
entire Bible is preserved
No.
when it's 9th century?
1 second.
94%.
So from the
of the
4th
Bible,
century is what I'm saying.
of the
From
New
the 4th
Testament.
century, I don't know how many copies in the 4th. So
I will tell you in a second.
All the way through to say the 10th century, there became these thousands of copies. I don't know the numbers per year. I will be able to admit
He
that.
says he's from the 9th
That's the
century.
point you guys need to get to
94%
refute,
of the
okay?
5,500
Yeah, but all I'm
manuscripts.
just saying that
the
the
guy
copies,
Which is the majority of the
claims that
manuscripts.
the
I'm
Quran
just
is
saying
not
from the
accurate,
4th century
but it's been
building up
changed.
through those
I've
centuries.
already seen his PhD
we ended
thesis
up with
based,
those thousands
the book is
copies.
based
They have
on.
thousands of different
He's like a high
things.
school
Yeah.
student
Here's an interesting
trying
thing.
to make a
All the
thesis.
differences
I would not have passed him as
So you have to give your points on why you refuse that.
Really?
Even
Yeah,
Bart
I've already mentioned that
Ehrman-
already.
You're talking
Bart Ehrman
in general.
has even
Oh, is that what you were saying up there?
with
Okay.
all
Yes.
the
I need to get a
he's
video
talking
actually
about,
to see
No,
it.
I
none of
have
them
read his
affect
speech
the
thesis.
core
Okay.
message.
Core
That's
message
it.
is the
It's like, as I said, not
No,
even a high
no,
school
all
student
the
would make
Which is
something
not
like
in the
this.
Bible.
We
All
know
the core
manuscripts
teachings.
all
has
the core teachings.
scribal mistakes.
Anyway, let's have one
make
discussion.
statements not enough.
We don't
You
want
have to
chaos.
come up with your reasoning for
Yeah,
that.
yeah. One
So are you gonna
Trinity is not
put on the
peripheral.
website your reasoning?
Look. Here's
I didn't
the
Josh.
Okay.
thesis.
Okay.
Intentional changes
Okay, you
in
got
the
it.
Quran by
Okay.
Daniel Brubaker.
So where are you going to refute that?
One moment.
Sorry, what are you guys discussing?
So
This
this
is,
is Brubaker. Now they think this is something. Don't worry about it.
definitely have got something.
Like I've refuted these people before, it will be another example
No,
of
you
my
won't.
PowerPoint.
You
Means
Also,
Jay Smith.
So is there a website we can go to see
one
your
second.
debate?
The lies they were talking about, like the Quran, 24, 31 versions
No.
and so on and so forth, Hafs Quran is different, Wash Quran is different. Just type in seashells. Yes. These are seashell missionaries. Okay, you're supporting them. You will see I have done enough examples of refuting them and their lies from Quranic manuscripts themselves.
Okay.
So you can just go on
And
online
you
and
quoted the
search.
sources, right?
Right. So
Where do
here,
I find you?
If you go to sfdawah and look for seashells, is it seashells?
Oh, seashells is what you're saying, is it?
yeah, just say seashell Quran.
Go look on
And
YouTube.
find my name
seashells.
Mansoor. I'm sure you'll find this particular video of this.
Dan Brubaker
Yeah.
has found variances in all the oldest manuscripts that exist. Okay, which is about 10 of them.
No, that's not true. He only
is true.
examined. He only examined.
So,
you
how many?
haven't-
How many?
Obviously, you haven't read his thesis, haven't you?
Mansoor.
You haven't read his thesis.
No, just look-
He's examined some manuscripts.
You're not up to date on that, mate. You're not up to date on that. You're not up to date on that.
My friend,
See.
how many manuscripts are there within the first 300 years of Islam? How many manuscripts?
That's 300 years.
Yeah.
I don't know the number. But he's not
Has he
just the
examined all of
most-
them?
He is. Yes. He's
Seashells.
not.
We have,
you
you
should
know,
look on
altogether, we have quarter of a
He-
million manuscripts.
No.
He has
But the
access.
very oldest, the very oldest the most
He had a debate
10,
with,
10 oldest
actually the
manuscripts,
explanation here.
like the ones he mentioned today, there has been
copy that entire
4,000 variances found
Okay.
in those old manuscripts.
Listen,
4,000.
let me give you an example of
4,000.
Look,
Yeah?
let me
And
give you
they're
some.
significant.
Let me give you some examples.
Significant.
You think significant? Okay?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Relax, relax.
No,
Okay, so
So,
I know.
that's coming
Same
up.
as
Yeah, so I've got it.
Did you read the book?
Huh?
Have you read the book?
Yeah.
It's not going to
You've
be
read the
published
book?
till tomorrow, is it?
Not the book itself, but I've read the content. Because I was given the content yesterday.
So
Hang on.
All
the
day.
selective
Spent the whole
Have
day.
you read his
Selective reading.
thesis? The answer is no. Have you read his
I've
book?
looked at the variances.
on.
I've looked at the
This
variances.
is what you guys do, isn't it? You
methodology-
make general accusations
No.
all
I
the
know,
time.
I know.
Instead of
Look.
just sticking to the facts. The book's
Excuse me.
the book's being published tomorrow,
Hello?
so I didn't even know it's available yet.
Listen, do you want to see
Okay.
how his thesis is dismantled? Look at all this
But I got
annotations
copy
Yeah.
yesterday.
by me
And I
and
got
various other people that
Yeah,
can do
I'll
the same
look at
thing.
it, I'll look at it.
So no, this is not what I'm
Anything
saying. Because I'm saying
On the top copy,
this
manuscript,
particular
some-
We'll
individual,
debunk it,
Yeah.
no problem.
No, you won't.
his methodology
That's what they said the last time.
less than core of a high school student.
These are in the
Let me
museum.
tell you why.
I don't really care.
Let me tell you why.
Because that's your generic statement.
You're
You're
not
not
going to
really
be some kind of twisted
I'm about to tell you why.
Okay, go on then.
To establish, like this book says, corruption of the text
Yeah.
implies there's some kind of intentional changes. This is his name of the thesis, intentional changes of the text.
Yeah.
But obviously, he doesn't tell you what he means by intentional changes.
Right.
Tell me, in his definition, what is an intentional change?
No idea.
It wasn't an accident.
Sorry, what's that?
It wasn't an accident.
Wasn't an accident.
He means unintentional.
Yeah, it wasn't an accident.
When we say biblical manuscripts are corrupted,
It was deliberate.
okay, deliberate.
Yeah.
So when someone scribes make a mistake by his eyesight and corrects it, is that a deliberate mistake?
That's not what it was. That's not what we're talking about.
So this is the level of your ignorance that
No, no,
you're showing.
not at all.
Allow me to finish my statement. You cut me half in the middle.
You're insulting me.
This is the
you're-
level
like
of
the
your.
liar you called
Look,
him.
Personal.
my
The way you called him a
friend,
liar
Personal
earlier.
bit.
my friend.
No, I was being the truth.
I
That's
will-
what you preach.
I'm gonna call a spade a spade. You know why?
No, I'm not being
Because-
personal to you.
Suppose you're
Because
lying
he defines what he means by intentional
I'm not
changes.
insulted by being like. If
He
you know,
says
I'm lying,
basically-
Yeah.
You said there was no
Any
context,
changes.
and he gave you the context, so you lied.
Any changes.
You guys-
So
Right.
even if it was,
You don't believe in it.
even if it was a change by some accident, he calls that a change. But you know that this is not a corruption of a text. For example, you might just miss a word when you're writing. That's not an intentional corruption.
Right. Can I give you an example? Here's an example then. So we've got in the old manuscripts the dots, the diacritics, whatever you call them.
In Hebrew, you're talking
Yeah. In those generations, but at that time, those dots did not exist. Of
course
So
they
in
did.
the
Must have showed
in
you.
those manuscripts.
From the first
Are you
century.
talking about the Hebrew now?
No, he's talking about the Arabic.
No, the manuscripts
The Arabic
of
manuscripts.
Quran.
Right, okay,
Those
okay.
Qurans,
Yeah.
as you see the Qurans without the dots.
Show him the first
The
manuscript.
dots get added later on. So in this particular example of the
That's what I said, little knowledge is
of the
dangerous.
manuscripts of that manuscript, which is the one you can find in the museum, it does not contain dots.
Which museum?
Huh?
Which museum?
The one in Topaki, wherever that is. So what's the first one?
Top copy.
Top copy,
Look,
yeah.
top copy, I'll tell you, I'll
Top
tell you.
copy.
No.
So let me finish. So in the
finish.
top copy, where he shows that this was an insertion, the insertion is the only element of the word that's got dots on them. All the ones around it have no dots.
So it's a
So-
later correction, right?
Yes.
Good.
So it's
Now-
not like a typo. Not
Okay.
that and fix it.
Wait a moment.
Much later on.
Okay.
So therefore,
Yeah.
somebody's come back to the manuscript.
I have the
and
top copy
made
on
the
my
correction.
phone, and we can go through that example if you want. Top copy is here on my phone.
With the dot, sure.
Right.
Yeah.
with the- now, wait, slowly.
The
Now-
original top copy.
Excuse me.
Doesn't it?
One second.
Yeah.
Let me show you before I go to this. Look,
Not top
on folio 330, page 7. There's an
I didn't know.
alif.
No.
Are you listening? Are you
It's
listening?
quite shiny actually. I thought you might be.
There is
Christian.
an alif insertion. So someone
Yeah.
inserts an alif
kindness
there,
about him.
Yeah.
and you call it corruption.
Islam.
Right? One example. Oh, in another one, there's an alif written on that. There's another one, another alif.
Yeah.
Right, wait. Oh, another alif. Oh, another alif.
Yeah.
So you're saying these are corruption, not realizing
That's
that
not. We know this is a
if you
correction.
allow
It's an
me to
insertion.
finish,
Insertion.
if you allow me to finish,
Use a new word.
an alif is an insertion in
Right.
his understanding.
Yes.
So Quranic manuscript had traditions in writing, because you have the Kufans writing in a particular way, you have the Basrans writing in another way. So manuscripts were written in a particular tradition of writing, because writing itself was being developed as the Quran was revealed to them. The Arabs did not have a fully functional, developed orthography of Arabic language. Quran is the first book in Arabic language that you can even point to. Right. So when there are Quranic schools writing Quranic manuscripts in different areas, in Basra, in Kufa and so on, they have their own traditions of how to write. The question is, how do you vocalize an oral text? For example, if I say I want to say Al-Alameen, now how do you write it with this prolongation? Are you going to write E-E-E-E-E-E-N at the end to say in? Or are you going to say one E? Or are you going to say E with a dash at the top? Convention is important. So when the Quran was written in certain manuscript traditions, all of those things which has like a vowelized form of alif sound, like Alameen, they would not have that vowel in there. So you might think it says just Alameen, but actually when it's written, it will be always, when it's recited, it will always recite as Alameen, even though there is no alif, this particular letter vowel, A type sound, A sound. So certain manuscripts were kept with certain places, and they thought, now we want to read this manuscript. It is not like, oh, a treasure. When they had this manuscript, it wasn't a manuscript, it was just a copy of the Quran. They want to read it, and they want to say, I want to read it with this aid. Now we have the aids of dots and alif, whatever, we can make it easier for us to read. So they would differentiate this with a different color and put it on the text so it's easier to read. Original is there, so you can see that, okay, this is like a
Preserving the pronunciation.
Yes, so just making sure people are pronouncing correctly. Without the alif, you would still read it as Alameen, Malik, and so on. So these examples are not of corruption intentionally by adding text. Get a life and understand what's happening. Secondly,
We're not even saying that. That's not even the claim. That is not the claim.
listen.
That is not even the claim.
Clearly, look, how can you even argue with me when you haven't even read the thesis?
But do they know even Arabic?
Look,
Do you even understand?
look,
The
Your
basics of
argument
Arabic.
is not against the claim.
You need to understand the
Listen,
basics of Arabic to know
The
this.
claim is saying that when we look at the original manuscript, those are the oldest manuscripts that we've got, which is not the original, obviously, because you haven't got an original
We
manuscript.
got the first century Al-Hijrah, unlike you guys.
What?
You don't have the first
We don't have
century.
the full Quran at the very first.
We do.
Anyway, guys, I'm going to go. Nice talking
Anyway,
to you.
likewise,
God
Julie.
bless,
Take care.
God bless.
Bye-bye.
Where are you from?
This long way away.
Long way away.
He doesn't want to tell you basically.
No, I won't.
But anyway, Julie, you get the idea.
Anyway,
Do you come down here every week?
yeah, pretty much.
No, you don't.
Said it, pretty much.
No, you don't.
I do.
Right,
I
right,
do.
it's okay.
I'm
it's
a
all right.
regular.
You know
Am I
you
not
guys
a
very
regular?
well.
We're old friends, Mark and I.
Yeah, we are.
Come on. So,
Anyway,
Julie, nice talking to you.
so-
Thanks for your time.
Yeah.
By the way,
Anyway.
watch the video. I give you the channel name.
If you go to the damn Brubaker, and of course there are 4,000 of these examples, in the book there are 22 that have been given, and these 22, we've got insertions, we've got subtext
I'll have a
underneath,
look, I'll have a look.
we've got things that have been removed and raised, we've got things
How do you two know
inserted
each other?
where there wasn't space.
I just told you, manuscript traditions can have scribal mistakes and correction within it.
Yeah, but here's the point.
What's the
Here's
point?
the point. Is that because of the evidence we've got, those
He's a proper mystery like you.
updates were clearly done at a later stage, not at the time.
Take care,
Not at
bye-bye.
the time.
So this is a homework for
And
you
the
Christians.
reason why we know this, sorry, let me just say this says the point. The reason why we know this, because there were different style of writing, different nib, different ink, and all the rest of it. Yeah.
Even Brubaker himself says this. Some of them are original correction by the original scribe.
Yeah.
You forgot to read that because you haven't read his thesis.
No, because somebody sent him only a selected
Yeah. So what I'm
portion
asking
of the
you
book.
is this: a homework.
No, there's
A homework.
4,000.
Little knowledge is
No,
dangerous.
no, hang on. A homework for
Not
you,
at
my
all.
friend.
Yes.
A homework.
Not at all.
Right. I want you,
This is
the
a red
Christians, I want you Christians to find an example that you think was very significant and find manuscripts, contemporaneous or earlier, which goes with supposed original and not this correction. Then you have a point. But if you can't find any manuscripts, but every manuscript is in line with how we read it, then you are just waffling and waffling, nothing else.
And
Waffling in the water.
Mark also find the first century Christian manuscripts. Because you said 79 AD. I want to know where.
So what I'm saying is that when you look at the earliest 10 manuscripts,
Which manuscripts?
the earliest 10 that we've
So are you talking about the Bible or the Quran now?
Quran. So in those manuscripts, you're seeing all sorts of variations, which has been documented. There's over 4,000 of them.
He's
Okay,
making
right?
how many of them of these 4,000
Yeah.
are actually variations that are consistent across the manuscripts from that period.
That's not my point.
That is my point.
No, but that's a red herring.
It's not a red herring.
Because what your claim is,
I don't think you understand what
what
you're
your claim is, every manuscript is perfect and
Who's claimed
without
that?
error.
Who's claiming that?
Muslims, you guys have. You've even claimed it. You've claimed it.
Slow down.
You've claimed it.
Slow down. Which Muslims on planet Earth are saying every single manuscript is like a printed copy without any printing mistakes? Who claimed that?
You guys have.
I think you're just making